Here's a quick video that I live streamed in the Photo Friends group, responding to a student asking this question about upgrading cameras. So I'm gonna switch over to the live stream and I hope you enjoy and this helps you out. But anyways, I just wanted to tackle this topic really quickly. And hey, what's up everyone live watching right now? I'm going to try to pop in here every now and then just to share more thoughts, quick tips, responses to people who are posting more often as I continue to transform photography and friends into an even better resource. So anyways, Mauricio asks a great question, and it's a question that even if it's not specific to you in terms of the models, the essence of the question is very much similar to what a lot of people are concerned about. If you are watching live, let me know if you're watching live, and I'll give you a shout out and also where you're listening in from. But his question basically comes down to upgrading his camera gear. He's looking at the Canon 6D Mark II, the Fuji X-T3, and the Sony A7iii. These are all great cameras that have been released in the past 12 months. And the Canon and Sony are full frame cameras. The Fuji is a crop sensor. The Fuji and the Sony are mirrorless cameras. The Canon is a DSLR. And so the question is, which one should he upgrade to? To basically, at the core of this, people, and I think this is what Mauricio is running into, and a lot of people are running into if they are trying to upgrade their gear, is how can I get better photos? And to be completely honest, as we've said throughout all of our classes, the masterclass, throughout our live streams, the camera you have doesn't matter. You can take amazing photos with pretty much any camera. I guarantee you can take amazing photos with any camera. And so don't go into this thinking that a new camera, a more expensive camera, is going to help you become a better photographer. That being said, there are some benefits to upgrading your camera gear. There's certain options. Of course, there's things like better resolution, higher quality sensors that give you more detail, more dynamic range, that allows you to shoot in different situations, such as a lower light situation or nighttime situation. Yuma, Arizona in the house, what's up? For some reason, I can't see your names on the tool that I'm using, but shout out to Yuma, Arizona. And so basically, going back to what I was saying, which was, what was I saying? Oh, these different cameras, there are some things about getting a new camera that does benefit you as a photographer. But in terms of these three cameras specifically, he asked if I had any experience with any of them. And I have not had experience with any of these specific models myself personally, but I have had experience with the similar model or the previous model. Joel, what's up from Yuma, Arizona? I see your comment now. So the Canon 6D is very similar to, the Mark II is going to be similar to the Mark I, which I've used, similar to the 5D and the 7D. It's also, this Fuji X-T3 is the upgrade to the camera I'm using right now, the X-T2. And then the Sony A7iii is very, very similar to the A7 II and even the A7R series, which I've used a lot. And Sam, our co-instructor buddy, he has as well. In terms of which one should you buy, I always go back to what do you have currently. And it sounds like, Mauricio, you already have a Canon. Now, the Canon you have is a crop sensor camera. So one of the biggest decisions is if you upgrade to another Canon, will the lenses that you currently have work with your full frame camera? Not all crop sensor lenses will work best with a full frame camera. The full frame camera might have to crop in or zoom in basically to be able to work with those lenses. If you have full frame lenses already that you use with your crop camera, then upgrading to a full frame body will work great with those lenses. And if you've invested a lot of money into higher quality lenses, then it might make sense to stick with Canon. And from what I know, the 6D is an amazing camera. it's not only great for photo, it's also great for video, which is another aspect you have to think about. If you are considering a camera, are you going to be doing other things with it like video? All of these cameras have video options. I would say the Canon 6D, because it has the Canon autofocus, is a great option. It has the flip out screen that rotates, which is great for vlogging, so a consideration there. The Sony A7 III, also really great for video. It also has the flip out articulating screen. The Fuji X-T3 does not have as great of autofocus or the fully articulating screen, so not really the best for video. It still shoots amazing video. All of these cameras shoot amazing video nowadays. I'm not exactly sure all the specs, but I'm sure they all shoot 4K. They probably all shoot 1080 slow-mo at a higher frame rate. So with video, I'm just going to leave that at that. That might be a consideration for some of you. In terms of jumping from Canon to Fuji or Canon to Sony, which is one of your questions, is how is that? I've actually done that. I used to be a full Canon shooter, and then I jumped over to Fuji, and that was a year ago now. I got my Fuji X-T2 right before my sons were born, and the reason I did that was because I just wasn't inspired or having as much fun with my Canon gear. And I saw Will, other co-instructor, who had the Fuji X-T2 at the time, and he fell in love with it. He let me borrow it. And there's something about Fuji that is incredible for the type of photographer that I am. It's simple. It's got all the buttons and dials that are mechanical on the body for changing things like shutter speed, ISO, and it was just very intuitive. And still to this day, it's well worth it. There's no part of me that wants to go back to Canon or switch over to another brand. Speaking of other brands, Sony makes incredible cameras, and I've actually used this. I took the Sony A7R II. Now, this was a few years ago now, but still pretty similar in terms of quality and the style of the A7 III. And I borrowed that from Sam, and I took it to Australia on a trip. And to be honest, hated it. I just could not jive with the Sony menus, the just ergonomics of it. But that was a totally personal thing. And I think while I do know, and I hear a lot of people saying similar things, that Sony isn't as ergonomic or just intuitive as a camera like a Canon or a Fujifilm camera, so many people love them. And so many people love the A7 III. It's an amazing camera. And if you look at just based off of the specs of everything and where these camera manufacturers are going, Sony is killing it. They are making cameras that have the best specs. They have all the features that you would want as a photographer. The dynamic range, the quality of the image, the autofocus, all of these things are amazing for Sony users. And so if you're going into it and you're trying to find the camera that just on a spec sheet is the best, most likely you'll find that the Sonys across the board are kind of top of the line. And the fact that they've kind of driven this change towards mirrorless cameras, and they are continuing to pioneer new cameras that just make it even better, and it's more affordable. I mean, the A7 III is an expensive camera for most people, but it's still a lot more affordable than a lot of the other full frame mirrorless cameras. For sure, it's probably the best full frame mirrorless camera out there. But there is just this difference in between making a decision based off of a spec sheet versus just the feel of the camera. And sometimes limiting yourself is actually better in the sense that with a crop sensor camera like a Fuji X-T3, with a limited number of lenses, a limited number of features, not so much with the X-T3, but with the X Pro series, where you literally, it's old school. It has a viewfinder, so a little window, instead of you're looking at the screen. It's not a digital viewfinder inside the viewfinder. It's just literally like a window, like you used to see on like an old point and shoot. And some people love that. The X-T3 isn't like that. The X-T3 is a digital readout inside the viewfinder. But sometimes putting those limitations on you can make you an even better photographer. So in terms of crop sensor versus full frame, this is a battle that has gone on for a long time. And again, I just go back to, you can take a great photo with any camera. And if you compare photos and you try to see, was this shot with a full frame camera or was this shot with a crop sensor camera, you'll find an equal number of amazing photos with each side. There are benefits to the full frame cameras, that you will get a little bit of a higher dynamic range typically. And I think with these cameras, the A7iii versus the X-T3, you probably will get a little bit more dynamic range. It will do a little bit better in low light situations, but that's it's kind of like comparing apples to oranges in the sense that yes, the A7iii will do better than the X-T3, and I'm not sure about the Mark II 60 versus the X-T3. But if you look at an older Canon 5D Mark II, that full frame camera probably does not have as good of dynamic range or quality or resolution as some of the newer crop sensor cameras, like the X-T3. In terms of even just the resolution, the X-T3, the crop sensor camera, has a higher resolution than the A7iii. And so you're actually getting more pixels, and not that more pixels is better, but don't go into this thinking that a full frame camera is automatically going to be better than a crop frame camera because you get more pixels or higher resolution. That's not necessarily true. Fuji specifically makes crop frame cameras because they know they can produce professional, incredible images with those crop sensors. They're just amazing how they are made now. And the other thing with crop sensors, one of the benefits is that you get a smaller form factor typically. Now these camera bodies, I think the A7iii and the X-T3 are probably about the same size. The 6D Mark II is probably a little bit bigger. But in terms of lenses and everything else, lenses are going to be a little bit smaller for the X-T3 and just crop frame cameras in general. So I know I'm blurting out a ton of information to you. I hope this is helpful. I see other people who are chatting. Abdullah says this is helpful. Thank you, Abdullah. Joel, thanks for the background love. And anyone else who's watching this, I do hope this is very beneficial to you as well. If you have follow-up questions, make sure you post them in the comments of this video or the post that I'm referring to, which is currently at the top of the group somewhere. But yeah, so like at the end of the day, really, the camera doesn't matter, but I know even I have gone through this decision of wanting to upgrade gear, and I did this last year, and it came down to the Fuji X-T2 versus the Sony A7iii because the A7iii had just come out, and I went with Fuji, and I'm not looking back. And the best thing you can do is go down to a camera store and test them out. Just put them in your hands, play with the menu, play with the settings, see if there's one that feels more comfortable in your hands. That alone will be better than anything else. You can also rent these cameras for relatively cheap. Borrowlenses.com allows you to rent camera gear. And for these newer cameras, it's a little bit more expensive, but to rent for like a week. But it might be worth it because you're investing a lot of money, not just in the camera body, but basically switching over to a whole new system and having to purchase new lenses and all of those kinds of things. I didn't even talk about lens choices. I love my Fuji lenses, although Fuji doesn't have as many lenses, or there aren't as many third-party lenses that work with Fuji. So that's one consideration. Sony has a ton of great lenses. Canon obviously has a ton of great lenses, and there's lots of third-party manufacturers who make lenses for Canon and Sony. So lots of considerations, but at the end of the day, go down to the store, feel it before you buy it, and whatever you get, remember, it's about you as the photographer and not the gear you use. All right, Have a beautiful day, and we'll see you and chat soon. Bye.